Hello and welcome to another retrospective of an iconic adventure game franchise. You can find a lot of videos about adventure games in my channel, like the full history of series like Space Quest, King's Quest, Gabriel Knight, Leisure Suit Larry, standalone games like Loom, Grim Fandango, and many more. You can also find a 2-hour documentary on the history of the genre with the rise and fall of the adventure games. If you like the content of my channel, please consider supporting it by subscribing and turning on the notifications for it. You can also consider supporting me by becoming a member of my YouTube channel. There is one membership tier and you will have a lot of benefits like exclusive updates on upcoming videos, you get to watch each new video earlier, you get to decide the topic of upcoming videos, and also member exclusive giveaways that will follow. This time we are going to cover a series that began under the adventure game genre and after 5 games evolved and changed to become police simulation video games. This is the full history of Police Quest. Since this series of videos follows the history of adventure games, we will only cover the first 5 Police Quest titles that are pure examples of the genre. The first 3 games were produced by former police officer Jim Walsh and follow the adventure of Sonny Bones, a character based on Walsh's son. Jim Walsh also makes some cameo appearances during each game's introduction. The 4th to 6th titles were designed by former LAPD chief Daryl Gates. Police Quest: In Pursuit of the Death Angel is an adventure game produced by Jim Walsh for Sierra Online. It was originally released in 1987 for the MS-DOS, Apple II, Atari ST and the Amiga. The game is set in the fictional town of Lytton, California during the 80s. The protagonist, Sonny Bones, must fight against the rising tide of drugs in his city. During his regular patrol, he visits a murder scene and later discovers the culprit linked to the murder when stopping him for driving a stolen vehicle. For successfully completing the case, he is promoted to acting detective of the Narcotics Division and begins his investigation on the city's drug lord Jesse Baines, also known as the Death Angel. The game is typical of the other Sierra adventure games of the era with regards to user interface and gameplay. The initial release features the typical text parser of Sierra, while the later VGA remake offered mouse support. The gameplay was centered on interacting with the environment to resolve a series of scenarios. A large amount of typical police work is required to progress, such as securing the crime scene and processing suspects. Failure to abide to proper procedure typically leads to the player being penalized on points or having his character killed. For example, if you don't secure your character's firearm, a suspect might grab it and attack Sonny. The game is the most realistic of those developed by Sierra in the late 80s, especially when compared with the rest of the company's franchises at the time, like King's Quest or Space Quest. Moreover, even though the game was built using the typical Sierra's engine of the time, the AGI or Adventure Game Interpreter, it differs from other releases as it features driving sequences where effective driving by the player is required to progress, like in the case of a chase scene. The first Police Quest game was received positively from fans and critics alike. There are even some reports that police stations used the game as part of training for new members of the police force. Police Quest II: The Vengeance is the second Police Quest game and the sequel to In Pursuit of the Death Angel. It was developed by Sierra and released in 1988 for the MS-DOS, Amiga and the Atari ST. The protagonist of the first game, Sonny Bones, returns and the whole game takes again place in the town of Lytton, California, following the events of Police Quest I. Bones is now promoted in the Homicide Division and lives with Mary Wilkins, which he helped in the previous game. However, their peaceful life is turned upside down when the villain from the first game, Jesse Baines, escapes from prison and takes hostages. Sonny Bones and his partner Keith Robinson must track down the Death Angel again and bring him back to justice. Even though the game was using Sierra's latest engine, the SCI or Sierra Creative Interpreter, the focus is again on detective and forensics work where the proper procedures for collecting and handling evidence are the main focus of many of the puzzles. However, the driving sequences and chase scenes from the previous game were dropped and now the protagonist will use his car to travel from one location to another without the players controlling the car. As mentioned by the series creator Jim Walsh, many of the scenarios present in the game are based on situations he or his friends were in while in the police force. The antagonist, Jesse Baines, is based on a convict who did escape and was on the loose at the time the game was released. Police Quest 2 The Vengeance was also received positively from fans and critics, with praise for the game's story, characters and setting. The use of the SCI and improved graphics was also received positively, and the game had increased sales when compared with its predecessor. Police Quest 3 The Kindred is the third game in the Police Quest series and the last to be developed by the series' original creator Jim Walsh. It was released in 1991 by Sierra Online for the MS-DOS and the Amiga. The story continues after the events of Police Quest 2 as Sonny Bones returns to Lytton with his new wife Marie. Bones resumes work in the Lytton Police Department as a newly promoted sergeant, and on his first day at work he becomes concerned over the actions of Pat Morales, a female police officer in the department who has received various complaints over her behavior and attitude. While he returns home, he receives news about an attack at the local mall where his wife works. When he arrives, he finds out that his wife Marie was the victim of a stabbing attack and is now in a coma. Bones vows to bring her attacker to justice and embarks on his new quest. The game was developed using the latest iteration of the SCI engine, offering full mouse support and a pure point-and-click interface. The mouse is used to select and interact with objects from the game world and the player's inventory, as well as to direct the player character around the various environments. There are also some events where quick action is required to avoid having the protagonist getting killed and restarting the game from the most recent save state. The game also features a driving minigame whenever the player travels from one location to another, similar to that of the original Police Quest, but with a more streamlined interface. During the late development stages of the game, Jim Walsh left Sierra for reasons that have still not been publicly explained. Sierra's employee Jane Jensen, who later created the Gabriel Knight series, finalized the writing for Police Quest 3, and SWAT founder Daryl Gates was named to take over the Police Quest series. Jim Walsh's departure marked the completion of the first cycle of the franchise, as nowadays Police Quest 1 to 3 are considered a trilogy due to the interconnected story and the returning character of Sonny Bones, who does not appear in the later installments. The next game, Police Quest Open Season, was the fourth in the series and the first to be helmed entirely by the retired police chief Daryl Gates, who was the chief of the Los Angeles Police Department from 1978 to 1992. Police Quest Open Season was released in November of 1993 for the MS-DOS, Microsoft Windows and Mac OS systems. A departure from the previous three games' story and setting, Police Quest Open Season is set in Los Angeles, California, rather than the town of Lytton, and stars the homicide detective John Carey instead of Sonny Bones. When the game starts, Carey finds his best friend and ex-partner murdered alongside an 8-year-old kid. John Carey sets out to find the murderer of his friend and solve a series of related killings among the city that seem to resemble gang violence. Homages to Sonny Bones appear in two places. The name of the police server is Sonny, and Sonny Bones also appears on the high score screens at the two arcade games. The game also differs from the previous three installments in the aspects of the visuals and engine used. Backgrounds for the game are digital photographs rather than painted scenery and depict real locations in Los Angeles. The entire game is based on a mouse-controlled user interface. Icons for walking, speaking, using and looking are used rather than the old-fashioned text parser system used in the previous three games. There was also a CD version of the game released in 1996 where written text is replaced by audible narration and dialogues. Police Quest Open Season also caused a bit of controversy upon its release, mainly due to the way the game depicted colored minorities. What was mostly criticized was the portrayal of some African American characters and the stereotypical use of African American vernacular English. Police Quest Open Season was praised for its graphics, which were revolutionary for the time of its release, and the improvement of police realism. The first four Police Quest games total more than 800,000 copies. The fifth game in the series marked and changed the branding of the franchise as the focus moved from the police quest to the SWAT aspect of it, as shown in the game's box cover. It was released in 1995 for the MS-DOS, Microsoft Windows and Mac OS, and because it made exclusive use of full motion videos, it required 4 CD-ROMs. Police Quest SWAT also marked the departure of the series from the typical graphical adventure game genre. You play the role of an unnamed SWAT new recruit and take up training missions and exercises. In fact, there are only 3 actual missions in the game. The first is unlocked after the character passes some basic training, and the next 2 open up after you complete the previous. The game is built on the SCI version 2 of the Sierra Creative Interpreter used in the previous Police Quest game Open Season and other adventure games of the era such as Phantasmagoria and Gabriel Knight 2, and utilizes a single cursor interface. It also uses much of the same technology as the previous game. Most backgrounds are scanned photographs with green screen actors, with sprites being used in many places, but there is much more use of full motion video. Even though the game was still marketed as a graphical adventure game, it plays mostly as a SWAT simulation. Police Quest SWAT was received poorly by critics who disliked the switch of genres, but its sales were excellent, making Sierra move the series away from its original Police Quest roots. The next game in the series, Police Quest SWAT 2, completed the evolution of the franchise towards the real-time strategy genre. It is the 6th and final game of the original Police Quest series, but retained only a few adventure game elements in the form of inventory, interface, and use of a few puzzle items. The next 3 games dropped the Police Quest branding and kept the SWAT title only. SWAT 3, released in 2000, was a tactical shooter, as was the case of SWAT 4 of 2005. Between the 2 games, there was also another SWAT game planned titled SWAT Urban Justice that was eventually cancelled and never released. The SWAT brand continued throughout the 2000s with games made exclusively for consoles and mobile platforms. That was the full history of Police Quest, one of the key franchises of Sierra that helped the company establish itself as one of the key developers of adventure games. The series evolved and changed genres as it progressed, but the original 5 Police Quest games are appreciated by a lot of fans even today. Do not forget to watch my other retrospective on iconic franchises like Loom, King's Quest, Space Quest, Gabriel Knight, and more. You can also find my 2-hour documentary on the rise and fall of the adventure games. If you like the content of my channel, please consider supporting it by subscribing and turning on the notifications for it. You can also consider supporting me by becoming a member of my YouTube channel. There is one membership tier and you will have a lot of benefits like exclusive updates on upcoming videos, you get to watch each new video earlier, you get to decide the topic of upcoming videos, and also member exclusive giveaways that will follow. We will have more adventure games videos soon. Thank you all for watching.